Hola amigos de TvAgro.
Hello, friends of TvAgro, friends of plants. I'm Diana Elizabeth from Plantar, and today we're going to talk about tips for our outdoor plants to survive.
Bueno, vamos a hablar
We are going to talk about the water,
y el aire que debemos suministrarles,
light, and air that we must supply to the plants, taking into account the location, the container, and everything they need.
y todo lo que nuestras plantas necesitan. No solo el aire,
Not only air, light, and water are necessary for them to survive,
sobrevivir, sino dónde están,
but also where they are located and in what container they are found.
en qué envase se encuentran. Hay que tener en cuenta que
It must be taken into account that with respect to water, we're going to talk about the quantity, temperature, and irrigation.
y el riego cada cuánto. Bueno, primero,
How often should watering be done? First, what I normally do is try to get to know each species and plant as much as possible
porque necesitan
because they demand very different things in time. For example,
puntualmente cosas muy diferentes. Por ejemplo, los helechos
ferns need a lot of humidity, so they must be watered constantly, that is, 2 to 3 times a week,
a la semana, las palmas,
just like palms that require similar care.
mientras que las suculentas
While, for example, succulents, cacti, do not need such frequent watering.
necesitan otros cuidados que demandan
They do need other types of care that require time.
tiempo. Bueno, primer punto, la luz.
First point, the light.
Que sea luz tenue a través de la ventana.
As far as possible, it is dim light through the window, but it does not have that magnifying effect that burns the leaves of the plants, or the plant itself, because the sun in Bogota, above all, is very strong. When we have the plants in an outdoor place, it is easier. However, I go back and repeat, in Bogota, the issue of the sun is difficult, because what it usually does is burn the plant.
Quemar la planta. Por eso es que a veces vemos las hojas.
Sometimes we see the leaves with these brown or yellowish edges, because we do not take into account that we are at an altitude of 2,600 meters,
De 2.600 metros y eso afecta un poco
and that affects the plants a bit,
las plantas que no están acostumbradas a recibir
especially those that are not used to receiving that intense sun like palms, ferns, and jungle plants basically.
los helechos y bueno, las plantas selváticas básicamente. Entonces necesitamos tener en cuenta
We need to take into account that light should not enter directly through the glass,
a través del vidrio que pegue directamente, sobre todo en ese horario
especially between 9 and 2 or 3 in the afternoon, since it is too strong, but after 2, between 2 and 4 and 2 and 5 p.m. is better.
4, 2 y 5 porque sabemos que su proceso de fotosíntesis es muy importante.
Because we know that their photosynthesis process is very important and light is very important for this process, but we must take this detail into account.
Segundo, el agua. Normalmente agua filtrada, agua reposada.
Second, the water. It is usually filtered or still water. The water I use is from the tap and I let it rest for 3 to 4 days.
Agua lluvia no recomiendo.
I do not recommend rainwater. It has definitely not been recommended for 2 or 3 decades
No se recomienda
due to global warming.
global. Normalmente las abuelas decían
Normally the grandmothers say, use the rainwater, but it is no longer used.
en recipientes plásticos, en baldes.
So what I do is let the water rest in plastic containers, buckets, or glass containers.
Agua durante 2 o 3 días y se usa únicamente
Anything can be used since the water is allowed to rest for 2 or 3 days, and then used, leaving a residue of 2 or 3 centimeters, because that is where what is not useful to our plant is stored, such as lime residues, even all these chemicals that they put into the water to clean it.
para limpiarla. Entonces todo eso lo omitimos, no se lo ponemos.
Therefore, it's better to skip those materials and leave them there. And normally the water should be at room temperature. But what does room temperature mean? Bogota can be at 1 degree or be 18 degrees.
Estar en 18, pero pues lo posible tener
But it's better to take into account water management between 9 and 12 degrees.
en 12 grados, una temperatura
that is, a cool ambient temperature.
¿Cómo es el riego de las plantas?
How is the watering of plants?
Tratar de conocer cada especie.
What I normally do is try to get to know each species to find out how it likes everything, the air, water, light, and even irrigation.
Entonces, el riego, ¿cómo vamos a...?
And how are we going to water our plants?
Normalmente lo que yo hago es identificar en qué envase está.
Normally what I do is identify which container our plant is in to see if it needs to be watered by immersion.
O regada con regadera. ¿Por qué? Porque
with a spray bottle or with a watering can. Why? Because what we normally do is water them this way.
Literal. Y cuando el sol les da,
I'm going to do it, literally. And when the sun hits them, what it does is burn the leaves because the water that remains on our leaves will heat up and dry on top of them.
va a calentar y se va a secar encima de ellas y va a quemar la planta.
And finally it will burn the plant. Normally, what I do with irrigation is water the soil punctually, since it is through the roots that they absorb the water.
Y no regar toda la planta ni regar sus hojas.
For this reason, I do not recommend watering the entire plant nor watering its leaves. If we want to water the plant by immersion, it is another possibility because in this way the plant will not burn.
La planta no se va a quemar si la tenemos en exterior, en vasijas en exterior.
If we have it in pots in an outdoor place, or if it is planted in a front garden, we must only water the soil.
Regar únicamente la tierra. Si queremos espolvorearlas, lo podemos hacer, pero en un horario.
If we want to sprinkle our plants, we can do it but at a time away from noon, so that the plants do not burn or suffer. Ideally, it should be at night.
Siempre mi abuela, ese era el consejo muy lindo que ella nos daba, como
My grandmother's advice was, before resting, water the plants. Why? Because during the day it is not recommended. It is more appropriate at night, and contact with them is a matter of relaxation.
Entonces tenemos ese punto como claro, el riego.
We have this point of irrigation, immersion, not watering the leaves and only the soil.
Vamos a hablar de la luz, y la luz es un tema súper importante.
We are going to talk about a very important topic, and it is light, especially in these cold climates, taking into account various points such as the location of the plant.
Debemos tener cuidado que no se genere ese efecto lupa.
If the plant is very close to the windows, we must be careful that this magnifying effect is not generated, because it is very easy for the plant to burn. It must be taken into account that there are plants with sensitive leaves. For example, ferns are very sensitive to this type of strong light and light through the windows. The palms, especially those known as areca palms,
Semisombra. Vamos a ubicar las plantas de tal manera, conociéndolas,
are from places in semi-shade. Therefore, we're going to place the plants in such a way, knowing them so that we do not clutter the spaces.
aunque mi consejo es, por ejemplo, la palma areca.
However, my advice is, for example, with the areca palm, which is a plant that needs a lot of humidity, that they be in a space with other plants, either with ferns or other plants, so that together they create that humid environment, an environment that plants need and is very important to them.
Otro punto muy importante es saber cada cuánto debemos regar nuestras plantas.
Another very important point is to know how often we should water our plants. I emphasize a lot on the fact of knowing our plants. Why? Because this is how we know how it develops and reacts to these three very important points: watering, light, and air.
Que son el riego, la luz y el aire. Entonces, ya cuando tenemos identificados los requerimientos,
Once we have identified the requirements or what the plant needs, we can easily supply them with everything they need.
mostrarles todo lo que ellas necesitan. Hay unas plantas que se saturan incluso de
There are plants that are even saturated with nutrition because we think that the plant is malnourished for various reasons. For example, because it is colored yellow or brown in the leaves,
y resulta que el amarillo o marrón en las hojas puede ser por exceso de luz,
and it turns out that these colors can be generated by excess light, also by lack of water or excess watering.
no todo es por falta de nutrientes. Los nutrientes a veces son
So we must bear in mind that not everything is due to a lack of nutrients. Nutrients are sometimes essential. Normally what I do is use magnesium, phosphorus and calcium, which are the main nutrients that plants need. Make home remedies or provide nutrients in a healthy way, and for me the best way to do it is at home.
Para mí, la mejor manera es la manera en casa. Bueno, yo soy muy amiga de manejar los nutrientes que puedo conseguir en mi casa.
I'm very fond of managing the nutrients that I can get at home. For example, I take calcium from the shells of the eggs.
El fósforo y el magnesio.
I get the phosphorus and magnesium from the banana peels and the coffee residue.
¿Qué hago con estas cáscaras? Las cáscaras de plátano o de banano.
What do I do with these shells? I put the plantain or banana peels in 1 or 2 liters of water. Let them boil for 10 or 12 minutes. Then the water is cooled before straining it, and finally I use it to water the plants.
El agua la utilizo para regar las plantas. De igual manera, las cáscaras de los huevos.
In the same way, I use the eggshells like this. Initially I crush them. I boil them for the same time as the previous one, and then strain them. And finally I pour that water to the plants.
No como cada semana, lo hago cada mes o cada 2 meses.
This procedure should not be carried out every week. I do it every month or every 2 months, depending on the needs of the plants, what they ask for.
Eso es todo por hoy con respecto a los consejos para que nuestras plantas.
That's all for today regarding the tips for our indoor plants to survive. If you have any questions on Instagram, you can find us as Plantar.Vivero and on Facebook as Plantar Vivero Virtual. Until next time.